In 1978, Iran was one of America's closest allies in the Middle East. 1 year later, the monarchy had collapsed. A new Islamic Republic was born. It all started with a covert operation in 1953. On August 19, 1953, Iran's elected Prime Minister, Mohammad Mossadegh, was overthrown in a coup planned and executed by the CIA and MI6. Declassified US documents, including the Wilbur Report and memos from CIA operative Kermit Roosevelt, detail how American and British agents funneled cash to Iranian army officers, organized street protests, and spread propaganda through local newspapers and radio broadcasts. British files refer to the operation as Operation Boot, while the Americans called it TP Ajax. Their main concerns were Mossadegh's decision to nationalize Iran's oil industry, which threatened British economic interests, and fears in Washington that Iran could drift toward the Soviet Union. Following the coup, General Fazlollah Zahedi was installed as Prime Minister, and the Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi returned from brief exile with the backing of foreign powers. Almost immediately, the Shah issued emergency decrees dissolving parliament and granting himself sweeping authority. The monarchy was no longer bound by constitutional limits. Over the next months, royal edicts restored foreign access to oil profits and placed the military under direct royal command. With parliament sidelined and opposition silenced, the Shah began to rule with near absolute power, setting the stage for a new era of Western-backed modernization and internal control. In 1963, the Shah launched the White Revolution, a sweeping program of reforms designed to modernize Iran's economy and society. Land reform broke up large estates, redistributing farmland to millions of rural families. Women gained the right to vote and access to higher education, while the Literacy Corps sent thousands of young teachers into remote villages. Oil revenues fueled rapid urban expansion, transforming Tehran and Abadan with new highways, factories, and apartment blocks. These changes aimed to build a new middle class loyal to the monarchy, but the pace and direction of reform unsettled many Iranians. Traditional landowners lost their influence, bazaar merchants faced new competition, and clerics saw religious schools and endowments threatened by state policy. To enforce order and suppress dissent, the Shah relied on SAVAK, the secret police established in 1957 with American help. SAVAK's declassified charter authorized broad surveillance and detention powers. By the early 1970s, its network of informants and interrogators had become a constant presence in daily life, targeting students, clerics, and political critics. The combination of promised progress and pervasive control deepened social divisions and sowed grievances that would soon erupt on a national scale. Ayatollah Khomeini's sermons, recorded on cassette tapes in exile, traveled quietly through Iran's bazaars during the 1970s. In Tehran's Grand Bazaar, merchants gathered behind closed shutters, debating new taxes and the loss of traditional credit lines. When the government raised commercial levies in 1970, shopkeepers staged a 4-day strike, halting trade and drawing thousands into the narrow market corridors. Meanwhile, university campuses became flashpoints for protest. In 1976, students at the University of Tehran occupied lecture halls, demanding academic freedom and the release of detained classmates. SAVAK responded with mass arrests, but campus sit-ins continued to spread. left-wing groups and nationalists, often at odds with the clergy, distributed underground pamphlets and organized clandestine meetings in apartment basements and mosque courtyards. Despite sharp differences in ideology and strategy, these networks began to share information and coordinate responses to state crackdowns. By 1977, the outlines of a loose coalition were visible. Clerics, merchants, students, and activists, each acting from distinct motives, but increasingly aligned in opposition to the Shah's rule. Oral histories recall how a merchant strike in Isfahan would ripple to student protests in Shiraz, and how cassette sermons in Qom found their way into factory break rooms. These connections laid the groundwork for the mass mobilizations that would soon follow. On January 7, 1978, a protest erupted in Qom after a government newspaper attacked Ayatollah Khomeini. When police opened fire, 2 people were killed and dozens were injured. News of the crackdown spread rapidly. 40 days later, thousands gathered for memorial marches. The pattern repeated, as each funeral became a new rally. In February, Tabriz saw mass demonstrations. Security forces responded with live ammunition, leaving at least 11 dead and fueling outrage across the country. By spring, the unrest reached Isfahan, where factory workers joined students and merchants in strikes and street protests. The momentum built week by week, drawing in oil workers whose walkouts in Abadan and Ahvaz cut national crude production by 30%. As autumn arrived, Tehran became the epicenter. On September 8, 1978, known as Black Friday, army units fired into crowds at Jaleh Square. Independent reports counted more than 80 dead and hundreds wounded. The violence triggered a wave of mass funerals, each swelling in size and turning local anger into a nationwide movement. With oil exports collapsing and daily strikes paralyzing the economy, the government's grip weakened. By the end of 1978, the crisis had become unmanageable, and the coalition of demonstrators, students, clerics, workers, and merchants had become a force that could not be contained. On January 16, 1979, Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi boarded a plane out of Tehran, leaving behind a country in turmoil. In the days that followed, cassette tapes of Ayatollah Khomeini's sermons, recorded in exile and smuggled through bazaars and mosques, continued to circulate by the millions. These recordings, copied and replayed from Tehran to rural villages, became the movement's lifeline, bypassing state censorship and uniting diverse groups under a single message. On February 1, 1979, Khomeini made his return to Iran after 14 years in exile. At Mehrabad Airport, he was greeted by an estimated 2 million people, crowding the roads and rooftops as far as the eye could see. The moment signaled a profound shift. Political authority, once centered on the monarchy, had passed to a new figure whose influence had grown through words carried on cassette tape. In April 1979, a nationwide referendum reported 98% in favor of forming an Islamic Republic. The new constitution established the office of Supreme Leader and the Guardian Council, granting clerics sweeping authority over law and government. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps was created to defend the revolution. On November 4, 1979, student militants seized the United States Embassy, taking 52 Americans hostage for 444 days, signaling the new regime's willingness to confront foreign powers and enforce its vision at home and abroad. Iran's political structure today still reflects the choices and upheavals of 1979. As regional tensions evolve, the global legacy of that transformation continues to shape geopolitics. Thanks for watching.